The arrival. The first sign that humanity was no longer alone in the universe came on a crisp autumn morning. Dr. Samantha Chen, lead astronomer at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, was sipping her coffee and reviewing last night's data when an alarm blared through the facility. She nearly spilled her drink as she rushed to the main console, her heart pounding. "What do we have?" she asked her assistant, Marco, who was already furiously typing at his workstation. I've never seen anything like this before, Dr. Chen," Marco replied, his voice trembling. "Massive objects, hundreds of them, just appeared at the edge of our solar system. They're moving towards Earth at an impossible speed." Samantha leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she took in the data. "This can't be right," she muttered, but deep down she knew it was. After years of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, it had finally found them instead. Within hours, every major observatory and space agency on the planet had confirmed the sighting. Governments scrambled to respond, and the United Nations convened an emergency session. As panic began to spread among the general population, world leaders tried to maintain calm while preparing for the unknown. In Washington, D.C., President Isabel Rice sat in the Situation Room, surrounded by her top military and scientific advisors. The tension in the air was palpable as they watched real-time updates on the approaching fleet. "What are our options?" Rice asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. General Marcus Blackwood, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, cleared his throat. "Madam President, we've mobilized our forces and put them on high alert. But the truth is, we have no idea what kind of technology or weapons these aliens possess. Our current defenses may be completely inadequate." Dr. Alan Feinberg, the President's chief science advisor, spoke up. "We should attempt communication before considering any military action. This could be a peaceful first contact scenario." Rice nodded, considering both perspectives. "Prepare a message for broadcast on all frequencies. We'll try diplomacy first, but I want our forces ready for any scenario." As Earth's governments raced to prepare, the alien fleet drew closer. Amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes began catching glimpses of the massive ships, sharing grainy photos and videos online. Social media exploded with a mix of excitement, fear, and wild speculation. In a small town in Kansas, high school teacher Sarah Thompson tried to calm her students as they watched the news unfold on the classroom television. "Remember," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "throughout history, humanity has faced the unknown and emerged stronger. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Across the globe, similar scenes played out. People gathered in homes, bars, and public squares, their eyes glued to screens as they waited for news. Religious leaders called for prayer and unity, while doomsday preppers felt vindicated as they retreated to their bunkers. As the fleet entered the inner solar system, its true scale became apparent. The ships were enormous, some larger than Earth's biggest cities. They moved with a precision that defied known laws of physics, effortlessly maneuvering around planets and asteroids. In low Earth orbit, the International Space Station became humanity's frontline observatory. Commander Elena Volkov, a veteran Russian cosmonaut, watched in awe as the first alien ships came into view. "Houston, are you seeing this?" she radioed, her trained composure slipping for a moment. "Affirmative, ISS," came the tense reply. "We're recording everything. Stay safe up there." Volkov turned to her crew, a mix of American, European, and Chinese astronauts. "Well, colleagues," she said with a wry smile, "it seems we have front-row seats to history." As the alien fleet approached Earth, it suddenly came to a stop, forming a perfect sphere around the planet. The largest ship, a behemoth that dwarfed all others, moved to a position directly over the North Atlantic. Then, silence. For 24 agonizing hours, the aliens made no attempt at communication. Earth's broadcasts went unanswered. Military satellites and radar systems were unable to penetrate the ship's hulls. The world held its breath, waiting for the next move. Finally, it came. Every electronic device on the planet, televisions, radios, smartphones, even electric billboards, suddenly activated. A face appeared on the screens, so alien it was hard for human minds to comprehend. It had multiple eyes arranged in a circular pattern, skin that seemed to shift colors like an octopus, and no discernible mouth. When it spoke, the words appeared in the minds of every human on Earth, somehow perfectly translated into their native language. "People of Earth," the alien said, its mental voice oddly melodious, "we are the Tsar Kresh Collective. Your planet now falls within our sphere of influence. We offer you a choice. Surrender peacefully and join our galactic empire as a protectorate, or face annihilation. You have 48 Earth hours to comply." The message ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving humanity reeling. In the White House, President Reyes immediately reconvened her advisors. "They can't be serious," she said, pacing the room. "Join their empire or be destroyed. What kind of choice is that?" "It's no choice at all, Madam President," General Blackwood replied grimly. "It's an ultimatum. They're not here to negotiate." Dr. Feinberg interjected. "But surely we can reason with them. Explain that Earth is a sovereign planet, that we have our own rich culture and history." Did that message sound like it came from someone willing to reason? Blackwood shot back. "They see us as primitive, a species to be conquered or eliminated." President Reyes raised a hand to quiet them. "Gentlemen, please, we need solutions, not arguments. Dr. Feinberg, work with our linguists and anthropologists. Try to craft a response that might appeal to these aliens. General Blackwood, I need a full assessment of our military capabilities against this threat, however grim it might be. We have less than 2 days to decide the fate of our entire species." As world leaders debated their response, the general public grappled with the reality of the situation. In New York City, thousands gathered in Times Square, holding up signs that ranged from "Welcome, alien friends" to "Earth will never surrender." Similar demonstrations occurred in cities around the world, a testament to humanity's diverse reactions to crisis. In a physics lab at MIT, Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked feverishly with her team, analyzing every scrap of data they could gather on the alien ships. "There has to be something," she muttered, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Some weakness, some flaw in their technology we can exploit." Her colleague, Dr. Hassan Nazari, looked up from his computer. "Yuki, even if we find something, how could we possibly fight them? Did you see the size of those ships?" Yuki spun to face him, her expression fierce. "We have to try, Hassan. Throughout history, humanity has faced overwhelming odds and survived. We've split the atom, cured diseases, sent people to the moon. We can't give up now." As the deadline approached, the United Nations convened a special session to vote on Earth's official response. The debate was heated, with some nations arguing for immediate surrender to avoid destruction, while others insisted on defiance. In the end, it was the impassioned speech of a young delegate from a small African nation that swayed the assembly. "We cannot bow to tyranny, whether it comes from our own world or beyond the stars," she declared. "If we surrender now, we betray everything our ancestors fought for, everything we hope to build for our children. We must stand united and show these Tsar Kresh that humanity will not go quietly into the night." Her words resonated across the globe, sparking a surge of determination and unity unlike anything seen before in human history. Old rivalries were set aside as nations pledged to stand together against the alien threat. With just hours left before the deadline, President Reyes addressed the world. "My fellow citizens of Earth," she began, her voice steady and resolute, "we have been presented with an impossible choice by beings who do not understand who we are or what we're capable of. They see us as primitive, easy to conquer or destroy. Today, we will prove them wrong." She paused, her gaze seeming to meet every viewer's eyes. "We do not seek conflict, but neither will we surrender our freedom. To the Tsar Kresh Collective, we say this: Earth is our home. We will defend it with every fiber of our being. We extend an invitation for peaceful dialogue, but we will not be subjugated. As Reyes finished her speech, a roar of approval rose from crowds around the world. Humanity had made its choice. They would stand and fight, against all odds. In orbit, Commander Volkov and her crew watched the alien fleet, looking for any sign of response. Whatever happens, she told her team, remember that at this moment, all of humanity stands as one. That alone is a miracle worth witnessing. As the deadline approached, the world braced itself. In homes and bunkers, in military bases and civilian shelters, humans from all walks of life waited to see if their defiance would bring communication or destruction. The future of Earth hung in the balance, with humanity's resilience about to be tested like never before. First contact gone wrong. As the 48-hour deadline expired, an eerie silence fell over the Earth. In command centers and living rooms alike, people held their breath, waiting for the Tsar Kresh response to humanity's defiance. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, now serving as Earth's impromptu war room, President Reyes stood surrounded by world leaders and military commanders. The tension was palpable as they watched the main display, showing a real-time view of the alien fleet. Suddenly, the massive lead ship of the Tsar Kresh fleet began to move. It descended slowly through the atmosphere, coming to a halt directly above the UN building. The ship's size was even more breathtaking up close. It blotted out the sun, casting an ominous shadow over the city. "They're hailing us," announced a communications officer, her voice trembling slightly. President Reyes squared her shoulders. "Put them through." The alien face appeared once again on screens worldwide, its multiple eyes blinking in an unsettling rhythm. "Humans," the mental voice resonated. "Your response is unexpected. We offer you one final chance for peaceful integration. We will send an envoy to discuss terms. Prepare to receive them." Before anyone could respond, a beam of light shot down from the ship, piercing through the roof of the UN building and materializing into 3 alien figures. They were tall, at least 8 feet in height, with iridescent skin and multiple limbs that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Security teams immediately surrounded the aliens, weapons drawn. President Reyes raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. She stepped forward, her face a mask of diplomatic calm. "Welcome to Earth," she said, her voice steady. "I am President Isabel Reyes, speaking on behalf of humanity. We are prepared to discuss peaceful coexistence, but we will not surrender our sovereignty." The lead alien, distinguished by intricate markings on its skin, focused its central eye on Reyes. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in the minds of all present. "I am Tarloth, emissary of the Tsar Kresh Collective. Your defiance is amusing, but futile. We have encountered thousands of species across the galaxy. All eventually recognize the benefits of joining our empire." General Blackwood, standing nearby, couldn't contain himself. "Benefits? You call subjugation a benefit?" Karloff turned its unblinking gaze to the general. "You misunderstand. The collective brings order, technological advancement, and protection. In exchange, we ask only for loyalty and resources. It is a small price for galactic peace." Dr. Feinberg stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "Your technology is indeed impressive. Perhaps we could arrange a cultural and scientific exchange instead of—" "Enough," Aksarlov interrupted, its mental voice taking on a harsh edge. "You speak as children, unable to comprehend the complexities of galactic politics. We do not offer this chance lightly. The alternative is—" The alien's words were cut short by a deafening explosion. The windows of the UN building shattered as a missile streaked past, impacting the underbelly of the Tsar Kresh ship hovering above. Chaos erupted. Security teams moved to protect the world leaders while the alien envoys retreated, their forms shimmering as they prepared to teleport back to their ship. "Wait," President Reyes shouted, reaching out to Aksarlov. "This wasn't us. We didn't. But the aliens were already gone, disappearing in a flash of light. On screens around the world, the Zarkresh face reappeared, its features contorted in what could only be interpreted as rage. Treacherous humans. The mental voice boomed, causing pain to all who heard it. You dare attack during peaceful negotiations. You have made your choice. Prepare for annihilation. The transmission cut off abruptly. Outside, the massive ship above New York began to ascend, rejoining the fleet in orbit. What the hell just happened? President Reyes demanded, rounding on General Blackwood. The general's face was ashen. It wasn't us, Madam President. That missile, it wasn't one of ours. As if in response, screens around the room lit up with breaking news. Amateur video footage showed a makeshift launcher on a rooftop several blocks away, operated by a group of people in civilian clothes. "Oh God," Dr. Feinberg murmured. "A terrorist group. Extremists." President Rice's mind raced. They had to fix this, and fast. "Get me a direct line to the Zarkresh ship. We need to explain." Her words were drowned out by a sound that shook the entire building. Above, the alien fleet had begun to move, spreading out in an attack formation. "Incoming," shouted General Blackwood as the first energy beams lanced down from the sky, striking major cities around the globe. The invasion of Earth had begun. In the chaotic hours that followed, humanity got its first taste of true interstellar warfare. The Zarkresh weapons were beyond anything Earth's militaries had ever encountered. Energy beams capable of vaporizing entire city blocks. Gravity weapons that turned the ground itself into a rippling, destructive wave. Swarms of autonomous drones that could penetrate any defense. Yet, in the face of this overwhelming force, humanity did not break. In London, as alien ships descended on the city, Royal Air Force pilot Sarah Collins climbed into her Typhoon fighter jet. "This is Raptor 1, ready for takeoff," she radioed, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "Raptor 1, you are clear," came the response. "Godspeed, Sarah." As she soared into the sky, joined by squadrons from across Europe, Sarah knew their chances were slim. But as she locked onto an alien craft and fired her missiles, she allowed herself a grim smile. They might be outgunned, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. In the skies above Beijing, a similar scene played out. Colonel Lai Wei led a formation of J-20 stealth fighters, weaving through energy beams and debris as they engaged the alien craft. "Remember your training." Lai's voice crackled over the radio. "Use their size against them. Stay nimble, stay unpredictable." The human fighters darted between the massive alien ships, their smaller size and maneuverability allowing them to evade the worst of the Zarkresh weapons. They couldn't do much damage, but they were a constant annoyance, disrupting the aliens' carefully coordinated attack patterns. On the ground, the situation was dire. Major cities around the world were under heavy bombardment, but even here, the human spirit of resistance shone through. In Rio de Janeiro, as alien drones swarmed through the streets, a group of favela residents led by young hacker Maria Souza found a way to disrupt their signals. Using jury-rigged equipment and sheer ingenuity, they created a localized EMP burst that dropped dozens of drones from the sky. "Take that, you alien bastards," Maria shouted, pumping her fist in the air as cheers erupted around her. The victory was small, but it sparked hope in the hearts of those fighting back. In Moscow's Red Square, a battalion of Russian tanks engaged in a fierce battle with Zarkresh ground forces. The aliens had deployed massive insectoid war machines that walked on 6 legs, each armed with devastating energy weapons. Captain Dmitry Volkov gritted his teeth as he maneuvered his T-14 Armata tank through the ruined streets. "Concentrate fire on the joints," he ordered his gunner. "We may not be able to penetrate their armor, but we can slow them down." The human tanks were outmatched, but they fought with a ferocity that seemed to surprise the Zarkresh. For every tank destroyed, the Russians made sure to take down or cripple an alien walker. As the battle raged on Earth, The International Space Station became an unlikely hub of resistance. Commander Elena Volkov and her crew used their unique vantage point to gather crucial intelligence on the alien fleet's movements. "Houston, if you're receiving this," Volkov transmitted, her voice steady despite the danger. "We've noticed a pattern in their attack formations. There's a momentary vulnerability when they reposition. Sending data now." The information was patchy. Earth's communications networks were in shambles, but it reached enough military commanders to make a difference. Human forces began to time their counterattacks to exploit these brief windows of vulnerability. Back at the UN headquarters, now relocated to a secure bunker, President Reyes and her advisors worked tirelessly to coordinate the global defense effort. The room was a cacophony of reports, strategies, and desperate pleas for aid. "Madam President," General Blackwood approached, his uniform dusty and torn from a narrow escape earlier. "I have updates from our forces worldwide. It's not good." Reyes steeled herself. "Give it to me straight, General. We're bloodying their nose, but that's about it. Our conventional weapons are barely scratching their ships. Nuclear options are on the table, but given their technology, we can't be sure it would be effective. And the civilian casualties." Dr. Feinberg interrupted, his eyes wild with a mix of fear and excitement. "Madam President, I've been in contact with scientists around the world. We have an idea, but it's risky." "At this point, Doctor, I'm open to anything," Reyes replied. Feinberg spread out a series of diagrams on the table. "We've been analyzing the alien tech as best we can. There's something odd about their energy signatures. It's like they're not fully in phase with our universe." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Blackwood demanded. "It means," Feinberg continued, "that we might be able to disrupt their entire fleet with a precisely calibrated energy pulse. But to generate something that powerful, we'd need to repurpose every major power station on the planet. And even then, we're not sure what the side effects might be." Ray studied the diagrams, her mind racing. It was a desperate plan, but they were in desperate times. How long would it take to implement? "If we get global cooperation, and I mean every nation working together, maybe 48 hours. Reyes nodded grimly. "Make it happen. General Blackwood, our forces need to hold the line for 2 more days. Can we do it?" The general's face was grim but determined. "It'll be hell, Madam President. But if anyone can do it, it's the men and women out there fighting right now." As the plan was set in motion, the battle for Earth intensified. The Zarkresh, sensing increased resistance, stepped up their attacks. Entire cities were leveled, but from the rubble, humanity continued to fight back. In the seas, submarines launched stealth attacks on the underbellies of alien ships that ventured too close to the water. On land, guerrilla tactics kept the alien ground forces off balance. In the air, human pilots continued to harass and distract the larger Zarkresh vessels. Every hour brought news of both horrible losses and incredible acts of heroism. A squad of Canadian Special Forces sacrificed themselves to bring down a Zarkresh command ship in Vancouver. A team of Japanese scientists developed a way to partially deflect the alien energy weapons, saving countless lives. As the deadline approached, Dr. Tanaka and her team at MIT worked feverishly to fine-tune the global energy pulse. "If we get this wrong," she told Dr. Nazari, her eyes bloodshot from days without sleep, "we could fry every electronic device on the planet." Nazari nodded grimly. "And if we get it right?" Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. "Then we show these aliens that humanity is not to be underestimated." With just hours to go before the pulse was set to fire, President Reyes made one final address to the people of Earth. Her face, streamed to whatever devices still functioned, showed the strain of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice hoarse but unwavering. "For 2 days, we have faced an enemy that thought us weak, primitive, easy to conquer. For 2 days, we have proven them wrong." She paused, gathering strength for her next words. I won't lie to you. The next few hours will determine the fate of our species. But whatever happens, know this. Earth does not stand alone. We stand together, united as one human family. And together, we will show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. As Reyes finished speaking, a resounding cheer went up from every corner of the globe. In bunkers and battlefields, in ruined cities and remote outposts, humanity prepared for its final stand. The countdown to humanity's desperate gambit had begun. Unexpected resistance. As the countdown to the global energy pulse ticked away, the battle for Earth reached a fever pitch. The Zarkresh, sensing that humanity was planning something, intensified their assault. It seemed as if they were determined to crush all resistance before the humans could spring whatever trap they had laid. In the skies over what was once Paris, Captain Amelia Durand of the French Air Force led a desperate defense against a swarm of Zarkresh fighters. Her Rafale jet, one of the few remaining operational aircraft in Europe, danced through the air in a deadly ballet. Escadron, formation Surrey, she barked into her radio, leading her squadron into a tight formation. They weaved between the gleaming spires of alien ships, using the Eiffel Tower, miraculously still standing, as cover. Amelia's heart raced as she locked onto an enemy fighter. Poor La France, she whispered, firing her last missile. The projectile struck true, sending the alien craft spiraling into the Seine in a spectacular explosion. But for every small victory like Amelia's, the aliens seemed to have an overwhelming response. Energy beams lanced down from the larger ships, vaporizing entire city blocks. Yet still, humanity fought on. In the ruins of downtown Los Angeles, a ragtag group of survivors led by former movie stuntman Jack Chen had turned the Hollywood Hills into a fortress. Using their knowledge of the terrain and improvised weapons, they managed to ambush and destroy a Zarkresh ground patrol. "That's how we do it in Lev, baby," Jack shouted, standing atop the smoking remains of an alien walker. His team cheered, their faces smeared with dirt and determination. They knew they were buying time, every minute of resistance precious for whatever plan the world's leaders had cooked up. Meanwhile, in a secret facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Yuki Tanaka and her international team of scientists were making the final calibrations to the global energy pulse device. The room was a chaos of blinking lights, humming machinery, and tense voices. "Power levels are fluctuating," Dr. Hassan Nazari called out, his fingers flying over a keyboard. "We're losing synchronization with the Asian power grid." Yuki rushed over, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Damn it," she muttered. "The aliens must have taken out another power station. We need to recalibrate. Fast." As they worked, a military aide burst into the room. "Dr. Tanaka, we've got a problem. Alien forces have been detected converging on this location. They must have figured out something big is happening here." Yuki's blood ran cold. If the Zarkresh reached them before they could activate the pulse, all would be lost. She turned to her team, her voice steady despite her fear. "We need more time. Whatever happens, this device must be protected and activated. The fate of our entire species depends on it." As if in response to her words, the facility shook with a distant explosion. The aliens were getting closer. Up in orbit, the crew of the International Space Station continued their valiant effort to provide crucial intelligence to Earth's defenders. But their position had not gone unnoticed by the Zarkresh. Commander Elena Volkov watched in horror as a massive alien ship broke away from the main fleet and began moving towards them. "Houston, if you can hear us, we have incoming," she reported, her voice tense but controlled. "It looks like they've finally decided we're a threat." The alien vessel dwarfed the ISS, its sleek form bristling with weapons. As it approached, a strange energy field began to emanate from it, interfering with the station's systems. "We're losing power," reported American astronaut John Carter, his hands flying over the controls. "Life support is failing." Volkov made a split-second decision. "We need to abandon the station. she ordered. "Everyone to the Soyuz escape pod, now." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, Volkov remained behind for a few crucial moments. She quickly typed out a final transmission, containing all the data they had gathered on the alien fleet's vulnerabilities. Just as the Tsar-Kresh ship prepared to fire, she hit send and rushed to join her crew. The escape pod detached from the ISS moments before a brilliant energy beam engulfed the station, turning humanity's foothold in space into an expanding cloud of debris. As the small Soyuz capsule plummeted towards Earth, Volkov allowed herself a grim smile. Their sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The information they'd gathered might just turn the tide. Back on the ground, the situation was growing increasingly desperate. Major cities around the world lay in ruins, and alien ground forces were making significant headway. But still, pockets of resistance held out, their determination unbroken. In the flooded streets of Mumbai, Indian Navy Marcos commandos engaged in brutal close-quarters combat with Tsar-Kresh shock troops. Lieutenant Raj Sharma led his team through the murky waters, their specially adapted weapons proving surprisingly effective against the alien armor. "For Bharat Mata," Raj cried as he lobbed a grenade into a cluster of enemies. The explosion sent alien body parts flying, but more kept coming. It was a scene repeated across the globe. Brave last stands against an overwhelming foe. At the UN command bunker, President Reyes received the latest updates with a heavy heart. General Blackwood's face was grim as he delivered the news. "Madam President, we're losing ground faster than we can replace our forces. The Tsar-Kresh have adapted to our tactics, and their technological superiority is becoming more apparent by the hour." Reyes nodded, her face etched with the weight of command. "And the energy pulse. Dr. Tanaka reports they're close, but they're under heavy attack. We've diverted every available unit to defend the facility, but..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew that every available unit wasn't much at this point. Suddenly, a junior officer burst into the room. "Madam President, General, you need to see this." He quickly pulled up a video feed on the main screen. It showed a Tsar-Kresh ship, one of their medium-sized cruisers, plummeting from the sky, trailing smoke and fire. As it crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, cheers could be heard from whoever was recording the video. "How?" Reyes breathed, scarcely able to believe her eyes. The young officer was grinning from ear to ear. "It's the Volkov maneuver, Mom. That data packet from the ISS. Our pilots have been using it to exploit a weakness in the alien shields. It's not foolproof, but it's the first real advantage we've had." For the first time in days, a spark of hope ignited in Reyes' chest. She turned to General Blackwood. "Get that information to every fighting unit we have left, and get me a direct line to Dr. Tanaka. We need that pulse ready now." As the new tactics spread, the tempo of the battle began to shift. Human forces, emboldened by their first major victory, pressed their advantage. In the skies over North America, a joint U.S.-Canadian air squadron managed to bring down 3 more Tsar-Kresh ships using the Volkov maneuver. Colonel Jack Maverick Mitchell whooped with joy as he watched another alien cruiser spiral towards the ground. "That's for the ISS, you bastards," he shouted, executing a barrel roll in his F-35 to avoid return fire. The alien response was swift and brutal. Seemingly enraged by this sudden shift in fortune, the Tsar-Kresh unleashed weapons they had been holding in reserve. Strange, shimmering fields began to appear over major battle sites, distorting space itself. In Berlin, German Leopard tanks found themselves suddenly floating helplessly in midair, easy targets for alien fire. Over the Korean peninsula, Earth-based missiles curved impossibly through the sky, turning back on their launchers. It quickly became clear that humanity's newfound advantage was temporary. The aliens were simply too advanced, their technology too far beyond Earth's comprehension. But in that brief window of success, something fundamental had changed. Humanity had proven, to themselves and to the Tsar-Kresh, that they were not to be underestimated. As the aliens redoubled their efforts to crush the human resistance, Dr. Tanaka and her team worked feverishly to finalize the energy pulse. The secret facility shook constantly now with the impacts of alien weaponry. "We're losing power to the eastern seaboard," Dr. Nazari shouted over the din of alarms and explosions. "The pulse won't be strong enough." Yuki's mind raced. They were so close, but without full power, the pulse might not affect the entire alien fleet. Then, an idea struck her. "The ISS data," she said, turning to Nazari. "The alien shields, they operate on a fluctuating frequency to deflect our weapons, right?" Nazari nodded, unsure where she was going with this. "What if," Yuki continued, her eyes shining with the fire of discovery, "instead of trying to overpower their shields, we synchronize our pulse with their fluctuations? We could slit past their defenses entirely." It was a mad idea, a one-in-a-million shot. But at this point, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, it was all they had. As Yuki and her team raced to implement the new plan, the battle raged on outside. The facility's defenses were crumbling under the relentless alien assault. In a last-ditch effort to buy more time, a squadron of fighter jets led by none other than Sarah Collins, the RAF pilot who had been one of the first to engage the aliens, flew a suicide mission to draw fire away from the facility. "It's been an honor, chaps," Sarah's voice crackled over the radio as she led her team on a strafing run against the aliens' main force. "Give 'em hell for us." Their sacrifice bought precious minutes for Yuki and her team. As the last of the facility's outer defenses fell, Yuki's fingers flew over the keyboard, inputting the final calculations. "It's now or never," she said, looking at her team. Each face that looked back at her was tired, scared, but filled with determination. They all nodded. Yuki took a deep breath and pressed the activation key. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a low hum began to build, quickly growing in intensity until it felt like the very air was vibrating. Around the world, every operational power station, every energy production facility, poured its output into the pulse. In orbit, the Zarkresh fleet suddenly found their systems going haywire. Ships collided with each other as navigation failed. Weapons powered down mid-charge. Communication between vessels dissolved into static. On the ground, human resistance fighters watched in awe as the seemingly invincible alien war machines stumbled and fell, their energy weapons sputtering out. For one brief, shining moment, it seemed as if humanity had snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. But the Zarkresh were not so easily defeated. Even as their technology failed them, the alien commanders adapted quickly. Orders were given in an incomprehensible language, and the Zarkresh forces began to regroup, relying on more primitive but still formidable weapons. In the Rocky Mountain facility, alarms blared as the energy pulse began to overload the systems. "We can't maintain this output," Dr. Nazari shouted. "The pulse is destabilizing." Yuki looked at the readouts in horror. The pulse was working, but the strain on Earth's power grid was too much. If they didn't shut it down soon, the backlash could devastate what remained of human civilization. But if they stopped now, the Zarkresh would recover, and humanity would lose its last, best hope for survival. As Yuki grappled with this impossible decision, the facility's last defenses finally gave way. The wall of the control room burst inward, and through the smoke and debris stepped the towering form of a Zarkresh warrior. Yuki found herself staring into the multiple eyes of the alien, its weapon trained directly at her. In that moment, with her finger hovering over the shutdown button, the fate of two species hung in the balance. The choice she made in the next few seconds would determine the future of Earth and perhaps the entire galaxy. The turning point. Time seemed to stand still as Dr. Yuki Tanaka stared into the alien eyes of the Zarkresh warrior. Her hand hovered over the shutdown button, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. In that frozen moment, Yuki's mind raced through countless calculations and possibilities. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the facility's battered communication system. "Dr. Tanaka, "This is President Reyes. Whatever happens, do not shut down the pulse. Earth stands with you. We'll find a way through this together." Those words, spoken with unwavering resolve, sparked something in Yuki. In a flash of inspiration, she realized there might be a third option, one that was risky, but could potentially save both humanity and the facility. With lightning speed, Yuki's fingers danced across the keyboard. Instead of shutting down the pulse, she began to modulate its frequency, creating a resonance pattern that matched the Zarkresh warrior's armor. The effect was immediate and startling. The alien's weapon sputtered and died, its armor beginning to vibrate at an alarming rate. The Zarkresh warrior stumbled backward, emitting a high-pitched keening sound that hurt human ears. "Now," Yuki shouted to her team, "overload the local emitters." Dr. Nazari didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand down on a series of controls, channeling an enormous surge of power into the room's localized pulse emitters. The air crackled with energy, and the Zarkresh warrior's armor began to glow red-hot. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, the alien collapsed, its advanced technology rendered useless by Yuki's quick thinking. As the dust settled, Yuki turned back to her console, her mind already racing ahead to the next challenge. "We can't maintain the global pulse indefinitely," she explained to her team, "but we can create localized effects. If we can transmit this modulation pattern to our remaining forces, we might just have a fighting chance," Nazari finished, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Across the globe, the tide of battle began to shift once more. As Yuki's modulation pattern was distributed to Earth's defenders, they found themselves with a new potent weapon against the alien invaders. In the ruins of Tokyo, a group of Japan self-defense forces, led by Captain Kenji Sato, put the new tactic to the test. As a Zarkresh walker approached their position, Kenji activated a hastily modified pulse emitter. The effect was dramatic. The towering war machine stumbled, its legs buckling as its control systems went haywire. "Now," Kenji shouted, and his team opened fire with conventional weapons. Without its advanced shielding, the walker proved surprisingly vulnerable, collapsing in a heap of twisted metal. Similar scenes played out across the battlefields of Earth. In Rio de Janeiro, Maria Souza and her team of hackers used the modulation pattern to turn the aliens' own drones against them. Over the skies of London, RAF pilots found they could now penetrate the Zarkresh ship's defenses, scoring critical hits with conventional weapons. But the aliens were far from defeated. As more of their advanced technology failed, the Zarkresh fell back on more primitive but still deadly weapons. The war took on a new, brutal character, with close-quarters combat becoming increasingly common. In Moscow's Red Square, now a hellscape of rubble and burned-out vehicles, Captain Dmitry Volkov led his remaining tanks in a desperate charge against a Zarkresh ground force. The aliens, their energy weapons useless, met the attack with surprising ferocity, wielding massive blade-like weapons that could slice through armor. For Russia, for Earth, Dmitry bellowed as he fired his tank's main gun at point-blank range, obliterating an alien warrior. But for every Zarkresh they took down, more seemed to appear, their inhuman strength and determination a match for human courage. As the battle raged on Earth, a new front was opening up in space. The crew of the International Space Station, having survived their emergency descent in the Soyuz capsule, found themselves in a unique position to strike back at the alien fleet. Commander Elena Volkov, bruised but unbowed, led her team to a secret facility in Kazakhstan. There, they were presented with an experimental spacecraft, a project that had been in development for years in anticipation of future deep space missions. "It's not exactly space-worthy yet," the project lead explained apologetically, "but it's the best chance we have of taking the fight back to orbit." Volkov surveyed the sleek, untested ship with a critical eye. "It'll do," she said firmly. "We owe it to everyone we've lost to take this fight to the enemy." As the hastily prepared ship blasted off from the Kazakh steppe, carrying Volkov and a volunteer crew of astronauts and test pilots, The Zarkresh fleet in orbit was in disarray. With their more advanced systems still scrambled by the energy pulse, they were struggling to maintain formation and coordinate their attacks. Volkov's ship, small and agile, slipped through gaps in the alien formation. Using a combination of the pulse modulation and good old-fashioned piloting skills, they began to wreak havoc on the fleet from within. "Target their command and control nodes," Volkov ordered as they approached a particularly large vessel. "If we can disrupt their communication, we might just give our ground forces the advantage they need." Back on Earth, in the UN command bunker, President Reyes watched the unfolding space battle with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The audacity of Volkov's attack was inspiring, but it was clear that humanity was reaching the limits of its endurance. "Madam President," General Blackwood approached, his uniform tattered and stained with soot. "We're receiving reports from around the globe. Our forces are rallying, but we're taking heavy casualties. The Zarkresh, they're adapting to our tactics faster than we anticipated." Reyes nodded grimly. She had expected as much. Despite the success of the energy pulse, the aliens still held a significant advantage in terms of numbers and overall technology. "What about Dr. Tanaka's facility? Have we managed to secure it?" Before Blackwood could answer, the bunker shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling as alarms began to blare. "We've been compromised," an aide shouted over the din. "Alien forces have breached the outer perimeter." Reyes stood, her face set in grim determination. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel. General, prepare for our last stand. It's time to show these aliens what Earth's leaders are made of." As chaos erupted in the command bunker, with staff rushing to secure vital data and arm themselves, Reyes took a moment to send one final transmission to Dr. Tanaka. "Doctor, if you're receiving this, know that you've given humanity a fighting chance. Whatever happens next, the fate of our species rests in your hands. Good luck, and Godspeed." Across the world, similar scenes of desperate heroism played out. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, indigenous tribes armed with blow darts coated in a neurotoxin found to be effective against Zarkresh biology ambushed alien patrols. In the streets of Paris, resistance fighters led by a former Louvre curator used priceless historical weapons to surprising effect against the alien invaders. But for every victory, there was a setback. The Zarkresh, driven by an implacable will to conquer, pressed their attack with renewed vigor. It seemed that even with their technology compromised, their sheer numbers and physical prowess might be enough to overwhelm Earth's defenses. In orbit, Commander Volkov's daring attack had thrown the alien fleet into disarray, but the tide was starting to turn. The Zarkresh, realizing the threat posed by the small Earth ship, began to concentrate their fire. "Evasive maneuvers," Volkov shouted as energy beams lanced past their hull, uncomfortably close. "We need to find their flagship. If we can take out their central command, we might just." Her words were cut off as a blast rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from overloaded consoles. "Direct hit," one of the crew members reported. "We're losing power to the main engines." Volkov gritted her teeth, her mind racing through options. They were deep in the heart of the enemy fleet, their small ship now limping and vulnerable. But they had come too far to give up now. "Set a collision course for the largest ship," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the command. "We'll use the pulse modulators to overload their systems just before impact. With luck, the chain reaction will take out a significant portion of their fleet." The crew looked at her with a mixture of fear and admiration. They all knew this was likely a one-way trip, but not one of them hesitated. As Volkov's ship made its suicide run, a new development was unfolding in Dr. Tanaka's facility. Yuki, working feverishly to maintain and improve the pulse modulation, had made a startling discovery. "The Zarkresh communication signals," she exclaimed, poring over data streaming across her screen. "They're not just carrying tactical information. There's something else embedded in the signal, some kind of psychic imprint." Dr. Nazari looked up from his own work, his brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Yuki?" "I'm saying," she replied, her eyes wide with the implications of her discovery, "that the Zarkresh aren't just coordinating their attacks through technology. They're linked psychically. And if we can disrupt that link, we could potentially incapacitate their entire force." Nazari finished, the enormity of the idea sinking in. Yuki nodded, already turning back to her console. "We need to recalibrate the pulse. Instead of targeting their technology, we'll target their minds. But to do that, we'll need to boost the signal strength beyond anything we've attempted before." "The power requirements would be enormous," Nazari cautioned. "We'd be risking a global blackout, maybe worse." Yuki met his gaze, her expression resolute. "At this point, Dr. Nazari, I'd say we're risking everything no matter what we do. At least this way, we have a chance of ending this war in one stroke." As Yuki and her team raced to implement their daring plan, the battle reached a fever pitch around the globe. In New York, the Statue of Liberty, miraculously still standing, bore witness to a desperate last stand by a mixed group of military personnel and civilians. In Beijing, the last operational units of the Chinese army fought street by street, using everything from advanced weaponry to ancient martial arts against the alien invaders. And high above the earth, Commander Volkov's ship streaked towards its target, a fiery comet aimed at the heart of the Zarkresh fleet. In these moments of supreme crisis, with humanity pushed to the very brink of extinction, the indomitable spirit of Earth's defenders shone brighter than ever. From the frozen wastes of Antarctica to the sun-baked deserts of the Sahara, humans fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that seemed to take even the Zarkresh by surprise. But would it be enough? As Dr. Tanaka prepared to unleash her recalibrated pulse, as Commander Volkov's ship closed in on its target, as President Rice and her staff prepared to make their last stand, the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine whether humanity would fall to the alien invaders, or whether they would snatch an improbable victory from the jaws of defeat. The entire planet held its breath, waiting to see which way the cosmic dice would fall. Victory and aftermath. The world seemed to hold its breath as multiple pivotal moments converged. In the secret facility nestled in the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Yuki Tanaka's fingers flew across her keyboard, making the final adjustments to the recalibrated pulse. In orbit, Commander Elena Volkov's ship hurtled towards the massive Zarkresh flagship, a kamikaze run that could turn the tide of the space battle. And in countless locations across the globe, humanity fought with desperate valor against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. "Power levels at maximum," Dr. Nazari reported, his voice tense. "Any more, and we risk overloading the entire global grid." Yuki nodded, her eyes never leaving her screen. "It'll have to be enough." Initiating pulse in 3, 2, 1. She hit the enter key, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a wave of energy unlike anything ever created by human hands burst forth from the facility. It spread across the globe at the speed of light, passing through buildings, vehicles, and living beings as if they weren't there. But when it reached the Zarkresh, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Across every battlefield, the alien invaders suddenly stumbled. Their coordinated attacks faltered as the psychic link binding them was abruptly severed. Some dropped their weapons, clutching at their heads in obvious distress. Others seemed to lose all sense of purpose, standing motionless as if waiting for orders that would never come. In New York, where the Galactic defenders had been on the verge of being overrun, the sudden disarray among the Zarkresh forces was like a miracle. Jack Chen, the former stuntman who had become an unlikely resistance leader, couldn't believe his eyes. "They're vulnerable," he shouted to his team. "Push them back. For Earth." With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city, the defenders surged forward. Similar scenes played out across the globe as humanity, battered but unbroken, seized this unexpected advantage. High above the Earth, the pulse wave reached the Zarkresh fleet just as Commander Volkov's ship was about to impact. The massive alien vessels, suddenly without coherent leadership or coordination, began to drift aimlessly. Some collided with each other, causing spectacular explosions that lit up the night sky. Volkov, seeing the effect of the pulse, made a split-second decision. Instead of ramming the flagship, she used the last of her ship's maneuvering power to dock with it. "Change of plans," she announced to her crew. "We're going to take this ship." As Volkov and her team fought their way through the disoriented alien crew, a similar drama was unfolding in the UN command bunker. President Reyes, who had been preparing for a last stand, found herself facing a group of confused and seemingly lost Zarkresh warriors. "Hold your fire," she ordered as her security team raised their weapons. Then, in a move that would be remembered for generations, she stepped forward, unarmed, to face the alien leader. "Your invasion has failed," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "But it doesn't have to end in more bloodshed. We are willing to discuss terms, if you are." For a long moment, the alien leader stared at her with its multiple eyes. Then, slowly, it lowered its weapon. The gesture of surrender was repeated across the globe as the Zarkresh, their hive mind shattered and their forces in disarray, realized the futility of continuing the fight. As the news of the aliens' surrender spread, a cautious sense of jubilation began to take hold. Humanity had done the impossible. They had faced an enemy with vastly superior technology and numbers, and through sheer determination, ingenuity, and a few strokes of luck, they had emerged victorious. In the days that followed, the full scale of both the devastation and the miracle became clear. Major cities lay in ruins, and the global death toll was catastrophic. Yet everywhere, stories of incredible heroism and unlikely alliances emerged. Former enemies had fought side by side against the alien threat. Ordinary people had risen to become leaders and heroes. The Zarkresh, for their part, were as stunned by the outcome as humanity. With their psychic link severed, they began to display individual personalities and even dissenting opinions for the first time in their species' history. Many expressed regret for the invasion, having been driven by a groupthink mentality they now found abhorrent. 2 weeks after the final battle, a historic meeting took place in the partially rebuilt United Nations headquarters in New York. President Reyes, now hailed as one of the greatest leaders in human history, sat across from the Zarkresh High Commander, Kaxarlov. "We have much to atone for," Kaxarlov said, its mental voice somber. "Our actions, driven by a hive mind we now see as deeply flawed, have caused immense suffering. We ask for the opportunity to make amends." Reyes nodded, her expression grave but not without compassion. "The road to forgiveness will be long," she replied. "But humanity has always believed in second chances. We are willing to work towards a peaceful coexistence if you are truly committed to change." The terms of the peace agreement were complex and would take years to fully implement. The Zarkresh agreed to help rebuild what they had destroyed, sharing some of their advanced technology in the process. A cultural exchange program was established, allowing both species to learn from each other. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the shift in humanity's place in the galaxy. Earth, once considered a backwater planet, was now known across the stars as the world that had defeated the mighty Zarkresh. Other alien species, previously too afraid to stand against the collective, began to reach out to form alliances with humanity. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, hailed as one of the saviors of humanity, found herself at the forefront of a new era of scientific discovery. The insights gained from studying Zarkresh technology opened up new frontiers in physics, medicine, and space travel. "We stand on the brink of a new age," she said in a global address, "one where the stars are no longer out of reach. The challenges we faced have only made us stronger, more united. The future is ours to shape." Commander Elena Volkov, having successfully captured the Zarkresh flagship, became the first human to captain an interstellar vessel. Under her leadership, Earth began to explore nearby star systems, establishing colonies and diplomatic relations with other peaceful species. "We came close to extinction, Volkov remarked as her ship prepared for its maiden voyage. But we emerged with a new understanding of our place in the universe. We are not alone, and we are not helpless. The galaxy is vast, but together, we can face whatever it holds. Jack Chen, the stuntman turned resistance leader, found himself being approached by movie producers wanting to tell his story. "Nah," he said with a laugh. "The real thing was way crazier than anything Hollywood could come up with. Besides, there are more important things to do now." He went on to establish a global network of disaster response teams, using the skills and camaraderie forged in the resistance to help rebuild and protect communities around the world. As for the Zarkresh, their society underwent a radical transformation. Without the psychic link that had bound them for millennia, they began to rediscover individuality and free will. Many chose to stay on Earth, working alongside humans in the reconstruction efforts as a way to atone for their actions. Karloff, once the voice of the collective, became an advocate for peace and cooperation between species. "We came to Earth seeing only a primitive world ripe for conquest," it said in a speech to a mixed audience of humans and Zarkresh. "We left humbled, having discovered a species with a strength of spirit that outmatched our technology. There is much we can learn from each other." 5 years after the invasion, Earth had changed almost beyond recognition. The scars of war were still visible, but they were gradually being healed. Gleaming spires of human and alien design rose from the ashes of destroyed cities. Zarkresh anti-gravity technology had revolutionized transportation, while breakthroughs in clean energy, inspired by their faster-than-light drives, were solving the climate crisis. In orbit, a massive space station served as a hub for interstellar diplomacy and trade. Ships from a dozen alien species docked there regularly, exchanging goods, knowledge, and culture. Humanity, once confined to a single world, was now taking its first steps into a larger, more complex galactic community. But with new frontiers came new challenges. Not all alien species were as willing to accept humanity's sudden rise to prominence. Dark rumors began to circulate of an ancient, slumbering threat stirring in the far reaches of the galaxy, disturbed by the ripples of Earth's victory over the Zarkresh. President Reyes, nearing the end of her term, addressed these concerns in her farewell speech. "We have faced extinction and emerged stronger," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the globe and beyond, to human colonies on Mars and Europa. "We have turned enemies into allies and reached out to touch the stars. Whatever challenges the future holds, we will face them as we always have, with courage, ingenuity, and an unwavering belief in our potential." As she spoke, Dr. Tanaka was putting the finishing touches on a new project. A device that could potentially open gateways to parallel universes. Commander Volkov's ship was charting a course into uncharted space, seeking to make first contact with a newly discovered civilization. And in classrooms around the world, children of all species sat side by side, learning about the vastness of the cosmos and their place within it. The Zarkresh invasion, as terrible as it had become a turning point in human history. It had shown humanity both its vulnerability and its incredible potential. The species that had once thought itself alone in the universe now stood as a beacon of resilience and hope to countless worlds. As the sun set on this new Earth, bathing the hybrid cityscape in a warm glow, a young girl, the daughter of a human father and a Zarkresh mother, looked up at the stars. In her eyes was a reflection of the entire galaxy, full of wonder and possibility. The invasion had nearly been the end of humanity. Instead, it had become a new beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But one thing was sure: humanity was ready to face whatever the universe had in store, standing tall among the stars. As night fell and the first stars became visible, they seemed to shine brighter than ever before. They were no longer distant, unreachable points of light, but beacons of worlds to explore, civilizations to meet, and adventures to be had. Humanity had not just survived. It had inherited the galaxy. The story of Earth's resistance against the Zarkresh invasion would be told and retold countless times across the cosmos. It would inspire other species to stand up against tyranny, to believe in the power of unity and perseverance. And at the heart of every retelling would be the simple truth that had saved humanity in its darkest hour, the unwavering belief that even in the face of impossible odds, there is always hope. As the galaxy turned and a new era dawned, humanity looked to the future with a mixture of excitement and determination. They had touched the stars, and the stars had touched them back. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just as a species, but as part of a greater galactic community. The invasion had ended, but humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning.